Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about the one of the important example on this particular mapping with the inheritance here. Like we have a different types of inheritance we have in Hibernate. So those example we identified. So using this particular table for subclass, table for hierarchy, and table for the concrete classes. So these are all the different types we identified in the last example. Like what are the example we identified here? So now you can see credit card as well as the billing details and bank account. With the help of this particular example, we created the inheritance here. Okay. So today we'll discuss about the one to one and many to one. Sorry, one to many and many to one association. How it is going to work here. Get in the pen. So it is the simple annotation we need to association we need to understand here. Here now what I'm doing here, many to one, and the other side what we will do, one to many. Getting the point. This is how we can use this particular association we need to understand here. So to understand this particular association, first what we can understand here, this association it is going to have the relationship between the classes and table here. Okay, whatever this association we are going to discuss here, this association internally it will try to contain with the classes and tables here. Tables is nothing but the like a database table, and columns is nothing but our Java classes. So internally we are going to have the relationship here. Now what kind of the relationship we are going to make, so that we need to understand here. Okay, now observe carefully. Whenever any change we made in the one side, get in the pen, one side is nothing but, if you observe carefully, so many to one side I change the some changes here. Okay, these changes it should be reflected in the other side, something like one to many also. It should be reflected in the other side also. So that section we'll discuss it. For example, if we are trying to discuss about the many to one and one to many, something like we have a one bid class. Okay, and another one item class. So bid here we are going to have multiple. Like here I am going to write here set of bids here. Set of bids here, and here only single item. Now if you observe carefully, here set of bids. So here we are having many. Okay, here only one item we are having, something like one. Now you can see many to one and one to many. Whenever I'm trying to make the relation item to bid, here it is a many to one. And whenever I'm trying to make the relation bid to item, here we are going to have one to many. So this is important here. Now here what I'm doing here, now you can see this section we can call it as a one to many, and this section we can call it as a many to one. This section we can call it as a many to one. So this is important section we need to understand here. Okay, whenever I'm trying to call item to bid, this is we are going to call it as a many to one, because here we are having something like many bids here, one item. Okay, and whenever the reverse we are performing one item, many bid sections here. So this is we need to understand. And here whenever we are trying to change the, whenever we are trying to modify some changes in the item section, in the item section, if I'm going to modify some changes here, it should be reflected in the opposite way also. So it should be reflected in the bid side also. Whatever the bid classes we are going to create it inside this particular bid also, it should be reflected. So how we are going to modify the changes? For example, I'm going to call like a bid dot set item. Get in the pen. Bid dot set item here. Okay. On the other side, now you can see item dot get bids. Okay, on the other side, so now you can see here I'm calling the item, and here I'm calling the bits here. So but the references are different here. Here I'm using the reference called bit, and here I'm using the reference called item. So this is important. Whenever I'm trying to modify the changes with help of this particular bit, it should be reflected in the other side, something like a item side here. Okay, so how it is going to reflected, that we'll discuss about the cascade here. With help of the cascade, it is going to update the changes. Okay, now understand here, but what we can understand here, whatever the changes we made, it should be reflected in the other side. For example, here now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to modify the item. This item also here it is going to affect it. Whatever the item here I'm trying to pass here, with help of this particular bit ID, this item also it's going to reflect here. Okay, so we'll see how this section it is going to work here. Okay, and what we can understand here, we need to understand here bid to item, we are going to have a different association, and item to bid also we are going to have different association. So the simple example here we are discussing here, something like many to one is one association, and one to many is another association. Getting the point? This is important. One to many and many to one, we have a different associations we have here. So how we can discuss this example? If I want to understand this particular many to one and one to many, we need to create the classes here. So what are the classes we need to create here? Here I'm going to create a one class called bid class. Okay, so this particular bid internally, it is going to have the relationship like private long ID. Okay, so these are all the objects we are creating inside this particular bid class. Now you can see one property we have ID, and another property we are discussing about the bid description, and the third property we are having is something like items here. Okay, now this is important. Now whenever we are trying to discuss this, first we need to generate the setters and getters for this objects here. Now I am selecting all. So this is the final bid class we created. It is like a one of the Pojo class. Now how I am going to create the mapping file here? The mapping file should be and let me copy another mapping file and we'll modify the based on our requirement here. So now you can see Hibernate dot here I'm going to make as a bid here. Okay, here what we can do, here we can modify the table as a bid. Okay, now so ID we have, instead of this particular user ID, we have a bid ID. Okay, we can go for the native. So internally it is using sequence here. Now what is the property we are having? The property bid description. Okay, so this is the description we are having, something like okay, so these are all the two columns we created. Now it is fine, but what we can understand here, this is important here. What about this particular the item here? Whatever the item we are creating here, for this particular item, what is the tag we need to use here? Getting the point? What is the tag we need to use? This is important. So the tag we are using many to one. So here we are having bids as a many and item is one. Okay, here we are having bid as a many and item as a one class here. It's like a one object here. So for this, now what is the association we are going to use? Something like a many to one. Now we can say many to one. And what is the name we are going to use? The name of the property we are using item. And after this, so it is going to reference us to the column here. What is the column we are going to use it? something like item underscore ID. Okay, item ID. So after item ID, what is the column, like what is the class we are going to refer here? The class we are going to refer as item. Okay, the class, when we are trying to create multiple classes here, what we can go for? Package here. So here you can specify now that, so all the classes will try to focus inside this particular package. Okay, item class I created. And here, one more constants I'm making, something like a not null. That is, we already discussed here. The not null, by default it is false, but I'm making true. Whenever I'm making true, here this is important here. Without this particular bit, we are not going to store this particular item object here. Okay, without this particular bit, we are not going to store item information here. Because of that, I'm making not null constraint. Now you can see many to one how we are creating. So this is the name of the property which we use under this particular bit class. And what is the column ID we are referring? Item ID. And what is the class we are trying to refer? Item class. So here we are making not null constraints because getting the pen here, what we can understand, whenever we are having the association without a one object null, we cannot store this information. Okay, this is, we need to understand the many to one association. So we created bit class. Now what we can do, we can go for the item class here. Item class. So where is the item class? Because the item class, I hope we already created here. Now you can see we have a different types of categories, all the information we have here. Now what we can do, here I'm going to provide the one more information, something like here, private set of bid here. What we can understand here, this is the bid set we are creating here, and last we can set here. So here we can call and generate and setters. Now observe the type we created, item type here. This type is not required here. Now you can see bit set we created. So now if you observe carefully here, what is the association we are creating here? Here we are having many bits. Okay, and single object, something like one item. Okay, so this is one to many. And opposite here, because here we are trying to discuss about the many, the same many it is applicable in the bits and one item. Because if we are having the many item, what we will do? So we are going to use this particular set here. We are going to use this particular set sections here. But right now, the item we are having only one object. So now you can see this is the model class we created. Now what we can do, we'll go for the item.hbm file here. Okay, now I will remove this. So name and description. Schema we can remove. So because we are not providing any schema so far, we identify the schema example how it is going to work. And now we can see item class, how many properties we are having, ID and name and description. So we need to discuss about this particular bid set here. So to identify this particular bid set, what is the tag we need to use is set to tag. And what is the name we are using? Bid set. Whatever the name we are going to use under the particular class, so we should refer the same information here. Getting the point? We should refer this particular bid section. And after this, now what I'm doing here, primary key is important here. Key section. So what is the key section we are going to use it? This is the key we are going to use, something like item ID. Okay. After defining this particular key, now what is another section we can discuss here? Here we need to provide the relation here. What is the relation we can provide? Something like one to many. And what is the many class we are trying to discuss here? Something like bid class. Okay, something like a bid class. So this is important here. Getting the point. Now you can see, observe carefully. Here we are trying to create a one set here. Why I am defining this particular set? Because we are trying to work with the multiple objects. Whenever we are trying to work with the multiple object, we need to come up with a set here. And here internally, we can define the primary key column. And this primary key column inside the bid class, it is trying to refer to the foreign column. So this same column ID here, it is trying to work as a foreign column. Okay, the foreign key column here it is working, and this is the primary key, and we are making the one to many association here inside the item class, and inside this particular bid class now you can see many to one association. So see the differences here, it is important here. Okay, after identifying this, now what we can do, we need to create the objects. So before going to create this particular object, how it is look like here, now I am going to create a here item class here, and here I'm trying to discuss about the bid class. Okay, so something like this is the bid ID, and here we can discuss about the item ID. Okay, and something like the bid description here. Okay, this is the bid class, and the same thing if I'm going to explain inside this item, we have a item ID and name. Okay, and description. What we can understand, this is important here. Whatever the item we are discussing here, here it is a PK. PK is nothing but primary key, and the same key here it is a FK, foreign key. Okay, this is important, and this particular bid ID here it is making as a primary key. Here it is making as a primary key. So bid ID is different, and item ID we are going to get a different here. Okay, same way, this is the primary key item ID we are using inside the bid table also. So this is, we can call it as a item, and this is, we can call it as a bid section. Okay, this is important, we need to understand. Now what we are doing is, so now we have the two different so undirectional association. So here what happens internally, there are the two in-memory representation for this particular foreign key here. Getting the point? Right now, when we are trying to update something, it is not affected into the another case here, because here we need to use one property here, something like inverse. When we are making this particular inverse here, so whenever one side operation is modified, automatically it will try to reflect it into the other side. It will try to update the information inside the another sections as well. But right now it will not update here. So whenever we are trying to save here, it will try to generate the two SQL statements here. Okay, but using this particular one column, like one property called inverse here, so it will try to make only one section's information. Okay, so what is the property we need to use it inside this particular set? Here we are having inverse. So by default it is false here. Now I'm making true. When we are making true, what happens internally? Whenever we are trying to update this particular item, automatically reflect the changes into the bid class. And whenever you're trying to modify the bid, automatically the changes will reflected into this particular item. So this is the bidirections operation, automatically it is going to perform by the Hibernate. Otherwise, we are going to generate the two SQL statements here. Okay, this is important, we need to understand here. So after this, another important the section we need to use here, something like here whatever we discuss here, the sections here cascade, like whenever we are trying to say, whenever we are trying to update here, how the sections are going to update it in the opposite table here, like in the another side table, because here we are having relations here. One table is associated with another table with help of this particular primary key and foreign key here. Okay, the item ID, now it is playing the primary key in the item table, the same item ID, now it is playing the foreign key in the bid table here. Okay, so for this purpose, now what we can understand here, we need to provide this particular cascade section. The cascade basically what exactly it is doing is, whenever we are trying to provide in this particular cascade, it will try to update the, or if you are trying to delete, it will try to delete the opposite table here. So let me add this particular cascade section here. So here only we need to add the cascade section here. Okay, by default it will not perform any the opposite table actions here. So cascade is none. Nothing is going to perform in the other table, like opposite table. Now what we can do, we can write here. So what I'm doing is save update. Okay, now you can see what we can understand here. This is important here. Whenever I'm trying to use this particular save update, whenever we are trying to update or whenever we are trying to insert the information in the one table, automatically it will try to update the information in the another table. So this inverse, what it will do, it will try to make the association, one side is a many to one and another side is a one to many. So this inverse is going to play the important role here, making the, so the opposite association. And this particular cascade, basically what it will do, it will try to provide like updation of the other table as well here. Okay, so this is all about the XML configuration we need to understand here. Now let me save this object here. To save this particular object, now what we can do, here I'm going to comment out this particular credit card section, whatever we discussed in the last example. And here, what is the class we can create? First, I'm going to create the bid class here. So I created the bid class, and after this particular bid class, set a description here. So simply bid description, and after this, now what I'm doing here, item, one item class I'm creating here. So item dot set a description here. Item description and item dot set name here. So what is the name of the item? Item basically we can discuss about the something like a laptop, and here what we can do. So the laptop related descriptions here, and items dot. So here he is expecting bid sections here. So multiple bids is expecting. Now what I'm doing here, for we have only one bid here. Now for that purpose, here I'm going to provide something like a set off. Whatever the set off method we discussed in the last example. Now this is I'm trying to use here. Okay, the off method. Now here what I'm doing here, I'm trying to make as a bid, and inside this particular bid section, we need to add item here. Okay, so this is important. Now here session dot save dot item. After save here, so tx dot, okay, not a tx, it's a transaction. Okay, transaction dot commit. Not clear, we should go for the close here. Now observe carefully what I am doing here. Here we are having one bid class, And another side, what we are doing is we are trying to creating item class. So item class we created here. Now observe carefully, item we created, item name and description. And after creating these two properties, after that I'm trying to set the bid section, item dot set of bid sets. So basically what it will do, it will try to set the multiple bids object here. Okay, it will try to set the multiple bids objects here. Now you can see what we can understand here, set of this particular bid sections here. Here, the off method internally, it will try to return the set of this particular bits object. So we discuss here off method whenever we are discussing about the collections. Okay, this is important here. Now observe carefully what we can understand here. What we can understand. So this is the one item we created, and another section we are trying to creating this particular bid, and here bid dot set item, we are setting this particular item here. Now the item is set into the bid, and the bid is set into the item here. So finally we'll try to run this example. Whenever I'm trying to run this, so unknown entity Hibernate dot item, where we are missing this particular item. Okay, so here billing details we are adding. Now this is not the section we need to add, something like add class item dot class. Okay, now because of this we got an exception. Now I'm trying to modify this. Now observe carefully. Now you can see, so association references like a unmapped class, whatever we are trying to associate the Hibernate dot item to item. So this is we are trying to map it with this particular bid here. So this particular bid is not showing here. Now what we can do here, we can try to set as a add class here, something like bid dot class. Again I'm trying to run the same example here. Now you can see what happening internally, insert into item and insert into bid section. So these are all the these are all the two tables are inserted. But what we need to focus carefully here, we need to focus carefully on the item ID. Whatever this particular item ID, it should match with the item table item ID. Okay, it should match with this particular item ID in the both sections here. Now we'll go for this particular example where we define. So what we are discussing, Hibernate related section we are discussing here. Okay, here we can understand this particular Hibernate, and inside this select star from bed class, and we have a one object here. And now you can see, so we have these sections here. So earlier we could not identify this. What happening internally, it is moving into the item class. Okay, it is moving into the item class here. So what we can understand here, if I'm going to select star from item section. Okay, now observe carefully, item ID 1, the item name, whatever the item name we discussed, like laptop, and this is the laptop description. And if I'm going to discuss this particular bid section, bid ID is a 44. Okay, bid ID is a 44. This is the bid description, and item ID is 1. So now it is matching with whatever the item ID we created. So if I'm going to discuss about this, not item. If I'm going to discuss about this particular item, now you can see here we are having foreign key constraints here. What is the foreign key constraints here? This is item primary key. Getting the point. So this is the primary key and foreign key relations it's going to provide here. Observe carefully. Now this is the one ID we have, like a foreign key. So it is now associated with this particular item ID, and internally it is trying to reference with the primary key of the item table. Okay, primary key of this particular item table. So this is the foreign key. Now if I'm going to provide this bid ID, bid ID is a primary key. This bid ID is a primary key. Here you can see primary key sections here. So this is important section we need to understand, many to one and one to many. So this is, we can identify the sections here. Now if I'm going to load here, how we are going to load the objects here? With help of whatever we discussed in the last session, session.load or session.get here. So we discuss here the two sections here. Now if I'm going to call here session.get, we can provide the particular class and serializable ID. Now here I'm going to provide item.class here, and the ID, what is the ID we can provide here? Something like long dot value of 1. Okay, so this is we need to provide, and what is the object it is going to return here? Item object here. I'm trying to typecasting this. So the typecasting is completed, and after this item dot, now what we can do, like get bit set here, and I'm using the loop here because it is going to get as a multiple records here. Okay, after this, now what we can understand, sys out here bit dot, what we can identify, the description, and another one what we can identify, bit dot get ID. Whatever the 45 ID we have, the section we can discuss here. And finally here I'm trying to discuss about the item dot get a description, and item dot get name, and finally we can discuss about the item dot get ID. Okay, this is we can identify here. Now if I'm going to run this example, so it will try to select the query, and from the select query it will try to print here. Now you can see, so it is trying to selecting from the item as well as it is trying to select from the bid also. But here what is the class I'm trying to load here? Only item class. Item class I'm trying to load, but internally it is trying to load bid class also. Now if you want to understand here, where condition we can see, so from bid is the table, and where the item ID we are having. Okay, here also from item we are having the item table, and where this item ID. So what are all these sections we can identify here? So bid set to O, like set 0 underscore item ID. This section we'll call it as a alias names, where we are setting this particular alias names here. Now if you see here we are trying to set here. So this is the alias name here. After table name, whatever I am trying to set here, this is B and this item. This B and the item here, we have a alias name. Same thing, Hibernate, now it is providing these sections here. Where is the table? So this is the alias names here. Okay, whatever you are able to see here, bid set 0 underscore. This is the alias name for the bid table, and item 0 underscore. Okay, this is the way of loading the object. Now if you see here, bid description and bid ID 44. So now if you can go to this particular bid class, now bid ID is a 44, and bid description. And later these are all the laptop like item related sections here. Okay, this is the way of inserting the data with help of one to many and many to one association. Now we are loading this particular example. Okay. So any questions? Any questions regarding this particular many to one and one to many? Okay. If we don't have anything, now what we can understand here, this is another important section we need to discuss here. Life cycle of this particular object here. What are the different life cycle of we have inside this particular Hibernate? We'll try to identify one by one here. Because now what we are doing here, we are trying to creating one object here. Here we are creating an object here. And after this, we are trying to save the object into this particular database. Okay. Now what we will do, we can delete this particular objects also. So for deletion, now what we can do, I'm going to comment out this. Okay, I'm going to comment out this and again enable this because I want to insert one more record here. I want to insert one more record. Now whenever I'm trying to inserting one more record, one record we can delete here. Okay, so if I'm going to run any table here, it will try to get the, so two records here, 192. So same information, but IDs are changing here. Okay, same way, now you can see 44 and 45 with description. Okay, so we have each and every table, two records here. And another important information, now we need to understand how this particular life cycle it is going to work and what are the different the stages we have inside this particular Hibernate to work on this particular life cycle here. So okay, first what we can understand here, whenever we are trying to create any object here, directly it is not going to associate with the database here. So to make the relationship, like to make the communication with the database here, now what we are doing is intermediately the transactions and sessions are so supporting to communicate with the database. If the session and the transactions are not available, so we are unable to communicate with the databases here. Getting the point, we cannot save the data, or we cannot load the data, or we cannot delete the data also. Getting the point, this is important here. And these sections here will identify first what are all the stages we are having. First one, here I'm going to write here transient here. Okay, this is the transient state, and we have another one persistent here. Okay, another one is persistent, and the last one is detached here. Okay, detached stage. These are all the different stages we are having. Now, whenever we are trying to create a new object with help of this particular new keyword, when we are trying to create a new object here, so this particular object, it is not going to associate with any session here. Simply just we created this particular object here. So those objects will available inside this particular transient state here. Okay, inside this particular transient state, we don't have any communication with the database here. Getting the point? This is important here. Now you can see whatever we discuss here. Here, this item and the bid up to this. Okay, up to this, these are not no longer associated with any session. Whenever we are calling the line number 41, then only it will try to associate with the session. But what we can understand, this objects now, those are in the transient state here. Okay, now we can identify how it is looking here. Okay, anyway, this section we can call it as the transient state here. So inside the transient state, just we are going to create an object. It is not going to associate with any database here. So this section. So directly, now what we will do, like if the objects are not associated with any session, here we are going to have the garbage collector. Okay, so this is, we can see something like a garbage collector. Directly, what happens internally, it will try to destroy this object. Directly, it will try to destroy this particular object here. So when this particular object, there is no relationship like this. When we are not having the relation transients to persistent here, now what happens internally, the garbage collector came into the picture, it will try to collect the unused object here. Because just we created object, we are not performing any operations here. Because of this, the object is removed from this particular heap memory. Okay, now after this, for example, this object is now associated with the database. When this object is going to associate with the database here, whenever we are calling with help of this particular session, anything you can call from the session, like loading an object, updating an object, saving an object, or if you're trying to delete also. Okay, if you're trying to delete also, it will associate with the persistent here. Anything whatever we are trying to perform with help of this particular persistent. So that section, whenever we are trying to perform with the session here, now we are moving into the persistent here. Okay, so now you can see this section. Okay, this section we can identify. This section we can identify as a transient here, and this section we can identify as a persistent here. So when we are trying to make the session.save, the object, now it is associated with the database. So we are trying to save the object here. Okay, here what we can identify, here we can call it as a save, or we can call it as a save update here. Okay, these two methods, using these two methods, from the transient state into persistent state we can make it. And the same thing, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to make the detached from the transient state, like a persistent state to detached state. How this particular persistent state to detached state, how it is going to move here. So when we are trying to call the first method, close. Okay, second method, clear. And the third method, await method. So this particular await method, what it will do, basically it will try to remove the object from the session. Get in mind, it will try to remove from the object. Like here, it will try to close the session, and it will try to clear the session. Okay, so now the object, whatever the object we are trying to remove from the session, we can call it as this particular await method. So inside the session, so far whatever the object is available, the object is going to remove from the session here. Okay, these are all the three methods. Whenever we are calling these three methods, now the object from the persistent state into the detached state, which will move here. So once the object is moved the detached state, it will try to destroy it. It will try to collected by the garbage collector. The object we can identify, it is not going to reusable anywhere here. Okay, whenever we are making this particular three method, the objects are not usable. These are all the particular three stages, whatever we are discussing, which is very important here. Transient state into the persistent state, from the persistent state into the detached state. How this particular object is moving. And I want to make the opposite directions here. Now we can see from top to bottom we are seeing it. Now bottom to top, how we can identify. I want to make the reassociation here. Get in pen. I want to make the reassociation. Now we identify, so we call the close method, or we call the clear method, or we call the await method, so that the object is no longer available. with help of this particular session. But anyway, I want to reassociate whatever the like a detached object we are having. So I want to this object reassociate. How we can reassociate with the help of some other methods here. This is important here. So here only each and every method it is going to work here. Something now you can call update method. Okay, or you can call save or update method. Using update or save or update method, now what we are doing is we are trying to reassociate the detached object here. Getting the point? Whatever the detached object we are having, now again I'm trying to set into this particular persistent state here. Okay, and from the persistent state I want to make transient here. So again, this object is idle. This object cannot have associated with any database. What we can do? The simple method we can call delete here. Delete method. Whenever you are trying to delete the object, so it will try to delete from the database. So once object is deleted from the database, now here we are trying to create here. Okay, so how we are creating the line number 36, how we are creating here. So this is the way the object will store in the heap memory. Okay, once the object is stored in the heap memory, what happens? It is try to collected by the garbage collector here. But whenever we are trying to make the object in the persistent here, so the object, if the object is available in the persistent state, those objects are not going to collected by the garbage collector. This is very important here because we are trying to perform some operations. Because of that only the objects are in the persistent state here. Okay, either the objects are in the detached state or either the objects are in the transient state. So those objects are going to collected by the garbage collector. This is important. Now you can see. So how many methods we are calling it? Here we are calling the save or update. From the transients object into the transients object we are making into the persistent state. Same thing. Now you can see here we are calling the update, save or update information. Okay, update, save or update section we are calling it. These sections also, okay, these sections also, now what we are doing is we are trying to make the detached object again into the persistent state here. So one more information we need to discuss here, the get related section. So get related section, basically it is a empty association. Like there is no the relation, like this particular object now it is in the transient state. Now directly what we will do, we'll make the persistent state by calling this particular get methods here. By calling this particular get methods here. Here I'm trying to write here. So what are the methods we can write here? So the first method we can call get method, and second method we can call the load method, and third method we can call the find method. These are all the three methods. So using these three methods, now what we are doing is directly from the initial state of this particular object, we are moving into this particular persistent state here. So now observe carefully. With the help of any one of the method, by default we are trying to set into the persistent state, even though those objects are not available in the persistent state or any other state also. Okay, this is very important. We are discussing this particular life cycle sections here. So any questions on this? Okay, so if you don't have anything here now, so makes this particular diagram very clear here, because if you understand this particular diagram, you can easily understand how the Hibernate is going to work and what are all the different methods we are having. So which method it is going to provide the which state information here. Okay, now I'm trying to clear this particular diagram.
Sir, could you please explain once again this transient method?
See, basically, transient method here, just we are trying to create a single object. This object is a normal object. This is, it's not going to make any association with the databases here. It's like a, now you can see person object we have. Now how we are going to create here the person object? Person, something like P1 is equals to new person. Okay, new person. Whenever I'm trying to create this particular person object, directly it will not save the object into the database. So whenever we are creating an object, this section we can call it as a transient state. So there is no link between the object and the database here. So if I want to make the relation between the Java object and database, now what we are doing here, we are calling with help of this particular session here. So session.save or session.save or update. Whenever we are calling this particular save or update method, now what happened here? From the transient state into it moving into the persistent state here. So because of that I provided here the two methods save or update here. Okay, so the basic object, like there is no relationship, the Java object and the database here. Now we are making the relationship. When we are making the relationship, either if you call this particular save or if you call this particular save or update here. Now this object store in the session. Now we are trying to make the communication with the database. With help of this particular save or update here, we are trying to store the data into the database. Okay, directly with help of this particular ID, we can load the particular object here. If this particular object is not going to store in the database, if you try to load the object, we'll get some exceptions here because the object is no longer available in the database here. So every state here, whatever the state we are discussing here, if I want to come back to the persistent is a very important state here. From the transient, we are coming back to the persistent. Again, from the detached also, we are coming back to the persistent. But if I want to come back to the any state, what is the important section here? Session. Okay. Without the session, you cannot call any method. Whatever that I am discussing here, you cannot call the delete, or you can call the, or you cannot call the update and save or update, or you cannot call the close, clear, and edit method, as well as you cannot call the get method, load method, as well as find method. So everything, any method we are discussing, all the methods we are trying to call with help of this particular sessions only. So when you are calling with the help of the session, automatically you are making the object into the session. Automatically we are moving into the persistent state here. But that is important here, from the which state we are coming back to the persistent, that is important here. Either you are coming back to the transient or you are coming back to the detached here. Okay, is it clear? Any questions? Okay, so if we don't have anything here, now I want to discuss about the object identity. This is important, we need to understand here how this particular object identity it is going to work internally. Okay, so let's see how this particular object identity is going to work. For example, if I want to compare the object, normally in Java, what we will do, if I want to compare the like a primitive data type here, now we'll try to use a double equals operator. So now you can see 10 equals to 20. So we can use the double equals operator, we can compare. So otherwise we can go for the equals method. So equals method, here you can pass the 20 value, and here you can call with the 10 dot equals to the 20. Getting the point. So same way, how we can compare the session objects here. How we can compare the session object, because each and every session object, it is associated with our persistent state here. Let's see here. Now what I will do, again I'm going to comment out this section. Here I'm trying to load the object. Session dot load here. and what we can give you, same the item dot class here, and ID we need to give long dot value of second I'm giving. Okay, second I'm giving. Now you can see what happens internally. This is I'm trying to use here, and what I'm doing here I can modify item 1 and item 2. These are all the two objects we are having. Now if I'm going to check this, item 1 equals to item 2. Item 1 equals to item 2. So simply now what I'm doing okay, both objects are same. Getting the point? So this is important. And internally what I will do, we can call it as a transaction commit and transaction close. For this we don't need. We'll see simply whether these objects are same or not. If both objects are same, this message is going to print here. Okay, now you can see here both objects are same. Now if you see here what happening internally, here we are not seeing any select query. Getting the point? This is important here. Here we are not seeing any select query. But earlier, whenever I'm calling this particular get method, I'm able to see the select query. Okay, so now another example I want to provide. So 4 I'm giving. I'm trying to give ID as a 4. Right now, with the help of this particular 4 ID, we don't have any records here. We don't have any records here. But now you can see this message is not printing because the item 1 we are getting as a null. Because of this particular ID 4, we don't have any record. So what are the records we are having? 192. In the item table, we are having only 192 here. But we are given as a item ID as a 4. Because of that, we could not identify the records here. So for example, if I'm going to load with the help of this particular get method, here I'm giving the same ID 4. The same ID 4 I'm giving. Now you can see we are getting an exception. Now what is an exception we are getting? No row with a given identifier exists. Getting the point? This is very important here. Whenever we are using this particular get method, getting the point? Whenever we are trying to use the get method, the ID it should be available in the database. It should be persisted in the database. If it is not available, so this is a exception we are going to get. But whenever I'm trying to call the same with the help of this particular load, what happening internally? We are not getting any exception. So simply it will return null. So if you understand more, we can put a breakpoint, line number 26 here. We can run in the debug mode here. Now you can see this item 1, what happening internally. So this description, category description and ID and a bit set, all the objects are null. All the objects are empty here. Now you can see it is returning empty. The category is also empty, description also empty, ID and name, all the values are null here. Because of that, we are not getting any exception. And we identified here get method, it is going to throw an exceptions here. So this is the differences we need to understand when we are discussing about the get and load methods here. Okay, so now what we can identify here, this identifier, both objects are same whenever I'm trying to load the object information here. Okay, so this is we identify. But the problem here, the problem basically this is here. After loading this, here only I can make. This is session 2 and transaction 2. Session 2. Okay, session 1, we are loading the one object. With help of this particular session 2, again I am loading the another object. So we'll try to discuss about the item 1 and item 2. both objects are same or not. Both these particular objects are same or not, we need to identify. Because now, how many sessions we are having? 2 sessions we are having. So IDs are same. Okay, same ID. Like ID2 and ID2 I'm trying to load here. But what we can identify here, these two objects are same or not. So Control Shift I. Oh, it is not providing. If it is not providing, what we can identify, we can go for the expression. Now you can see it is returning false. Why it is returning false now? Okay, all the inside the objects are same basically. Whatever we are going to discuss here, the bits will contain. Why we are getting empty? All we are getting an empty here. So even though all the objects are empty, but it should satisfy here. Getting the point? It should satisfy this particular section. But right now, these objects are not satisfied. Now you can see it is trying to load the SQL queries. Basically, it will try to look up the cache. If the cache, the objects are not available, it will load from the database. So the load method, it will give you some advantages here. What are the advantages it will give you? So if it is a database, so on top of the database, it is going to work with one cache mechanism. Getting the point? So ID 1, if you are trying to give the ID 1, what happens internally? First, it will check in the cache. Okay, so this is the cache we can identify. Inside the cache, if it is not available, it will go to this particular database. From the database, it will load the data. Okay, now it will set into the cache. So it will set into the cache, and from the cache again it will set back to the wherever we are trying to reusable here. Okay, now so second time onwards, if you are trying to give the same ID, what it will do? It will load from the cache only. It will not go to the database. Okay, so this is the load method. Now another important advantage what we are getting, based on this particular ID, if we are not having any objects here, simply it will return null. It will not going to throw any exceptions here. So another important section, get method. So get method basically every time it will directly connected to the database. There is no the cache mechanism. If the ID is not available, it is going to throw an exception. Okay, it is going to throw an exception. This is one of the important example we need to understand here. Okay, so this is the differences between get and load. And when we are trying to discuss about the session 1 and session 2, even though both objects are same, but we could not getting the point. We could not, those both objects are not same. So this is we need to understand here. So when we are trying to use the equals operator or the double equal operator or the equals method, we need to compare very carefully, because whenever we are using multiple sessions here. So even within the same session, the objects are same, and whenever we are trying to use the same object with the different sessions here, both objects will be different here. Because of the different session, the objects are different here. So this is I want to provide the information here. Okay. So after this, so we already discussed about the equals method and hash code method. So this is another important section we need to discuss here, query criteria. How this particular query and criteria it is going to work. Basically, query and criteria, it used to load the data from the databases. So whatever the get and load method we are using it, same way we have two other interfaces. What are the two other interfaces we are having? The get and query and criteria. So using this particular query and criteria, we are going to load the data. So we'll see how this particular query is going to work, and later we'll discuss about the criteria. Okay, so to understand this particular query and criteria, now what we can do, we need to understand this. So we already discussed the two example how it is going to work here. Okay, so here only I am going to comment out this section, and after this, so what we can do, how this particular delete is going to work first before going to discuss about the query and criteria. Now, the last method inside this particular session here, we need to discuss about this particular delete here. How this delete is going to work. So what we can do, we need to provide the user here. So to delete this particular user, what we can do here, we need to load the user basically. Okay, we need to load the user. So how I'm trying to load this particular user? Now you can see with help of this particular item. Okay, so first record I'm trying to delete, load here. After loading here, I'm trying to delete this. And we can commit this particular transactions here. So I will explain this particular the like Hibernate SQL query how it is going to generate here. This is important here. Then only we can identify whether this particular object is deleted or not. The first record object I'm trying to delete here. It's a simple one here. Directly we can call this particular delete here. Now, so when we are trying to delete here, observe carefully. Because of this particular foreign key constraints here, we are getting an exception. So because of this particular foreign key constraints on the table bid, directly the item record we cannot delete here. Okay, if I want to delete this, first what we can delete here, we can delete the bid table first. Okay, so this is I'm trying to delete the bid record first. So later I'm trying to delete the particular item information here because of the particular primary key and foreign key. So again, because of this particular list of objects here. Now you can see unknown entity org hibernate collection dot persistence set here. What we are providing here, bid set. Bid set is a set of records here, not the single record here. Not the single record. So what we can do, if I want to delete the single record, so this is the loop we need to use here. So this is the way we can identify how this particular exceptions we are going to get here. Now here, bid. So using this particular loop, now what I'm doing, I'm trying to delete one by one object here. Now you can see first it is loading the objects and later it is trying to delete. So delete from bid and later it is trying to delete from the item. Okay, so this is the way of deleting the object. Whenever we are having the primary key and the foreign key, how we are deleting, whatever the relation table we are having, first we need to delete and later wherever we are having the primary table, we can delete the primary table later. So because here the primary table is the primary item table, so whenever we are trying to delete the item record, it is not deleted successfully because we are getting an exceptions here. Okay, the foreign key constraints exception. First we are trying to delete the bid with help of this particular line number 27, and after deleting this particular bid, and we are trying to delete the same item information. Okay, so this is all about the simple example, and finally we need to identify the query and criteria related sections here. So before going to discuss about this particular query and criteria related section, we need to identify the one of the important example on the many to many association here, because we discussed the one to many and many to one, and only the pending one many to many association is pending here. We'll discuss items with a category here. Whatever the items and category we are having, we can discuss about this. And so before going to understand the many to many, just we need to understand how we can use the query section here. Okay, so here we are having session dot create criteria as well as create a query we are having. So what is the query we can provide? So you can write the Hibernate query language here. So this is not the SQL. So if you see here, this is query, basically it is a SQL query, the structure query language. But whatever we are going to write here, it is a Hibernate query language here. Getting the point. So this is some differences we have between this particular Hibernate query language as well as the structure query language here. So I'm stopping here. I will try to continue this particular query example and criteria in the tomorrow session, because it is going to take some more time to continue this particular query and criteria. And along with that, we need to discuss about the many-to-many association. And finally, once this particular query criteria and many-to-many completed, now what is the last section we discuss here? Transaction related sections we are going to discuss here. How the transactions are going to perform in our Hibernate here. Okay. So after this, what we can do, we'll try to discuss. We'll come back to the Spring with Hibernate here. So here, only Hibernate section we are discussing it. Once we complete this particular Hibernate, we can go back to the Spring wherever we stop here, and we'll try to continue the Spring with Hibernate here. Okay. So we'll continue tomorrow. So any questions regarding our today's session? Any questions? Okay. So if we don't have anything here, I'm stopping here. We'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you all.